The immune system is supposed to tell what's you and what's not you. That's pretty simple. And then in the not you category, it's supposed to tell what's dangerous and what isn't dangerous. There are a lot of things that are not you that enter your body every day. You did that right now, right? You just put some stuff in your mouth, chewed it up. And in the not you category, it's supposed to tell what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. And then thirdly, ideally, the immune system quickly and efficiently destroys what is dangerous and not you. Now, things can go wrong with this system. Number one, the immune system may identify part of self as dangerous. And that happens with diseases. The immune system gets confused and it starts destroying you. And there's some examples of this. That's called autoimmune diseases, like rheumatoid arthritis. The immune system thinks the cartilage in your joints is dangerous, and so it starts to destroy it. And then you get bad arthritis. Or lupus, that's another one. You might have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's a condition where your immune system thinks your thyroid is dangerous, and so it starts to destroy it. And that's trouble. And we don't like the immune system to do that. It causes lots of problems. So that's one way the immune system can fail. Diabetes type 1. Your body thinks that your pancreas islet cells are dangerous and it destroys them, and as a result you can't make any insulin. And that's not good. Another way that your immune system can fail is that it can fail to identify dangerous non-self. And this happens with leprosy. Leprosy, that you can grow millions of the leprosy bacteria in your nerves, in your hands or in your feet, and they just sit there and the body doesn't destroy them. They just live there. And cancer the same way. Cancer grows, and if your body could identify that as dangerous, you have an incredible arsenal within your body that can destroy the cancer very quickly. But the cancer looks kind of like you, doesn't it? And so the immune system isn't sure, and it thinks, well, should I destroy this or not? It really kind of looks like Peggy, and yet it's not, and it's not sure. And so if you get cancer, the immune system has to determine, is this dangerous or not? And when it fails to determine that, then the cancer grows. The frontier of cancer right now is to figure out ways to make antibodies to the cancer, because if you can once make an antibody is just a tag, and anything that's tagged with an antibody, then the immune system quickly identifies it as dangerous and destroys it. And so if we can make antibodies to cancer cells, then our body can kill the cancer, no problem. It has no difficulty doing that, provided you have an intact immune system. So that's the other thing the immune system can fail to do, is identify non-self that is dangerous. A third thing that it can do is it can identify harmless non-self as dangerous. That's called allergies. You know, the ragweed isn't going to kill you. Goldenrod isn't going to kill you. Dust mites aren't going to kill you. But the immune system says, hey, this is dangerous. Let's destroy it. And then you get all these symptoms that you really don't need. And then you take medicines to turn off the immune system. That's what you're doing when you take those, you know, if you spray that stuff up your nose, what's that? That's called Flonase or cortisone-like substance. That turns off the immune system, and it helps the allergies, but it renders you more susceptible to infection. So you need to be careful when you're treating allergies, and you need to think, well, why do I have these, and what can I do so that my kids don't get them, and We can talk about some of that. So that's allergies. That's also celiac disease. The body identifies wheat, which is, for most of us, harmless, although there's some questions on that. We can take that up if you'd like. And then another one that's similar to this is transplant rejection. Your heart fails, you get a new heart put in, and now we have to take drugs to suppress the immune system so the immune system doesn't recognize this, yeah, it is foreign, but it's now part of you, as dangerous. Because if it does, then you get heart transplant rejection or kidney transplant rejection. So the immune system can fail that way. It can also, number 4, it can correctly identify dangerous non-self but not have the power to destroy it quickly. So maybe you get the correct identification, but then your immune system is impaired for some reason. Maybe you're nutritionally depleted, or maybe you're taking drugs that impair immune system function, or maybe you're just too tired. You know, if you're tired, your immune system's tired, so sleep is important as well. So those are the basic ways that the immune system functions and can malfunction. Any questions about that before we move on? Yes, question. Great question. What about antihistamines? Well, what is histamine for? What does the body make it for? First of all, if you look down a little bit further, you'll see a cell under granulocytes called a basophil. And basophils make histamine. And histamine is like sending out a call. I've got trouble here. There are some invaders. Please come help. So if you take an antihistamine, you will slow down immune system response to the call for help. That's what you're doing when you take an antihistamine. Now, your immune system has lots of strength, and you can reduce its function quite a bit and still have enough. But you will be more susceptible to illness if you take an antihistamine. Question?
What about a natural antihistamine like nettles or quercetin?
Okay, good question. What about natural antihistamines? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but first let me introduce a concept. The immune system is like the Border Patrol and the Coast Guard and the National Guard and the FBI all rolled into one system. And you know, if you have military personnel wandering around and they're loaded, you know, they're packing heat. And you know, if you get too many of them in one place, you have to have some oversight, right, Bill?
Yes.
Bill's a military man. You need some oversight because these people can really cause damage. And so they need some guidance and some oversight. And you need to be able to communicate quickly with them when you've got a problem and to get them ramped up and going. If you've got an invader, if you've got an enemy, you want to be able to get those troops to the place of the incident, the problem, quickly, have them go quickly, and then as soon as the problem's done, stop. Okay? Many of the foods that we're going to talk about are able to do both. You've heard about antioxidants, right? Antioxidants reduce inflammation. What's that? That's turning down the immune system. The nice thing about the plants is they provide the nutrients necessary so so that the immune system is ready for action, but they also provide the antioxidants so when the fight is over, you can put a blanket on the inflammation. You can turn off the fight. You know, in California, we're having fires right now. And fire is a good thing when it's controlled, but that's out of control. Fire is really nice in your fireplace when it's cold, but it's not good outside your fireplace burning down your house. And our body's main defense against fire out of control is antioxidants. So you have to be careful when you say, well, I've heard that this or that or the other thing is really good. It's an immune system stimulant. Good, but we want to have an immune system stimulant and a suppressor at the same time so that you don't get the fight out of control. And that's a really important concept. Within your body is an armed force that is powerful enough to kill you within the next 20 minutes. And that could happen with something called anaphylactic shock. Have you ever heard of that? That's the immune system reacting too much to something you're allergic to. You can also have that with something called septic shock, where the body goes all out to kill an invader, but it overdoes it and you go into shock and you die unless you have help. So the immune system must be kept in balance because it's so powerful. If you let the military go with the instructions in this country to destroy everything in this country, it could accomplish it, but it couldn't accomplish it as fast as your body can destroy you if the immune system isn't kept under control. And that's very important to understand. The other thing, and I have it, it's right part of this, is chronic immune system activation results in inflammation, which underlies many chronic diseases. And so every day there are invaders that our body has to deal with, and inflammation results. But if we don't have a diet rich in antioxidants, we will have low-level inflammation that sets us up for heart disease and high blood pressure and cancer and arthritis. You name the chronic disease, underlying it is inflammation, and the immune system is one of the major areas where this inflammation stems from. So then I talked there, the next little paragraph, about the immune system. It is different from our military in this country in that it is never offensive outside of the body. My immune system doesn't come out of me and attack you. It's only inside. And I won't draw any more parallels there, although that could be done. That's going into the political realm, and we're not going there. All right, so let's talk about the cell types of the immune system. Basically, they're lymphocytes and granulocytes. And the lymphocytes are long-lived. Many of them are long-lived. The Tcells can live for years and years and years. And so can some of the B cells. If you get an immunization, how does that work? Well, what you do is you introduce some of the organism that you don't want to get infected with, like the coating of the influenza virus or the pneumonia or the tetanus, the coating of that, and cells in the body called macrophages and dendritic cells and lymphocytes detect this, and they take that we call antigen, they take it to the lymph nodes and they show it around, and they say to the T cells, hey, look what I found. And the T cells are very wise, they really are, and they're knowledgeable, and they've been around since you were a little baby, and yet they can learn, and they examine this stuff, and they determine whether it's you or not you. And if it's not you, they have to determine whether it's dangerous or not dangerous. And once they determine that it's not you and that it's dangerous, the T cells put out a call to the B cells, lymphocytes, and they say, hey, we've found an invader that we need to protect the body against. Come and make antibodies. Antibodies are molecules that are Y-shaped. They have two arms and a body, and they go around looking for invaders, and once they attack an invader, they hang on and they don't leave. And if they've tagged an invader, that invader is doomed to death. Doomed. They're going to die. And the interesting thing is, the first time you're exposed to flu vaccine or pneumonia vaccine, the antibodies are made. Then if the virus or the bacteria shows up, it doesn't even have a chance, because once you have a B cell that can make that antibody, it can ramp up production so fast the infection never gets a foothold. Now, if instead of getting the vaccine, you got the disease, it might get a foothold at first, but the body would never let it happen a second time. Now, I will tell you that your body is much better once it's had the infection at ramping up production than if you just have the immunization. That's why, how many of you were born in 1956 or before? All right, did you ever get a measles, mumps, or rubella vaccination? No, you didn't if you were born in 56 or before, because you had the disease. And if you had the disease, you are immune for life. But if you had the MMR vaccination because you were born more recently, you may have to get a booster. But I'll tell you, it's way better to have a vaccination than to go through measles, mumps, and rubella like I did and like many of you did. Because you can end up blind, you can end up sterile, you can end up with lots of problems, and that's why we came up with the immunizations. But those of you that suffered through those illnesses and survived them have a stronger immune system because of it. And another example of that is, and don't think I'm against vaccinations, because I'm not. Influenza vaccinations, they're wonderful, but if you never get one, and then a year comes when we miss on the vaccination and we don't get it right for the flu for that year, everyone that's had a vaccination every year will be much more susceptible than those who have never had a vaccination. Interesting how that works. But the body does an amazing job at identifying infections, and once you've had them, it's hard to get it again, except for a very few bugs, like chicken pox. You won't get chicken pox again, but you can get, what? Shingles. Why? Because that virus never leaves you. It lives inside the nerves. And so you get a vaccination against that, and you build up the immunity, and then when the virus pokes its head out of the nerve where it's safe, the immune system can grab it quick. And the latest vaccination, called Shingrix, is 90% effective. The old vaccination against shingles, Zostavax, was only 50% effective. So if you had the Zostavax but not the Shingrix, you might want to look into that. And this is B cells that were educated, in this case by a vaccination. How often will you have to get the Shingrix? We don't know. But hopefully only the 2 dose and then you're done. There was such an overwhelming response to that the company has not been able to keep up with demand. For those of you that have had shingles, you can understand why you might want to get a vaccination. shingles isn't that bad. What's bad is if you get shingles and it damages the nerve permanently. That's called post-herpetic neuralgia, and that's chronic pain that never leaves, and that's horrible, and that's the real reason to get the shingles vaccine. And if you live in too cleanly an environment when you're a baby and a youngster, then you're going to have allergies. So, you know, we've cleaned up our environment so much and our food so much that we get allergies. Remember, the immune system, if it doesn't have a task to do, can get in trouble, particularly when you're little. And so don't give your kids too many baths, and let them play in the dirt, and give them pets, and let them eat a wide variety of food. And, you know, we get crazy clean, and that's not necessarily good for us. All right, so we talked about the T cells, and there are many kinds of T cells, but two main ones, suppressor and helper. And you guess it, the suppressor kind of turn off the immune response, and the helper turn it up, they amplify it. You could call the suppressors like military police, maybe. Keep those boys and girls under control when they get too rowdy. We talked about the B cells. They're memory cells and effector cells. Memory cells are like the ones when you had a vaccination. It remembers, and when that shows up again, it calls the effector cells and say, hey, we got an invader, I want you to help me make antibodies, and it can make millions and millions and millions of antibodies that then flood your body and tag the invaders, and then you can kill them. The killing can be done by lymphocytes. There's one other type of lymphocyte that I didn't mention that's a T cell, and that's called an NK cell. That's a natural killer cell. Natural killer cells are like the special forces. They don't have to wait for antibodies. They're specially trained. They're specially instructed by the T cells, those long-living, wise T cells, and they say, now, you NK cells, sneak through the body looking for invaders. And when you see one, don't wait for the word from us. Kill it. Just kill it. They're really helpful in killing cancer. And guess what? We know that there's some things that you can eat and some things that you can do that will double your NK cell number and effectiveness. And I'll keep your attention by not telling you that yet. It's coming. If I forget, remind me. All right, granulocytes. Their neutrophils are like the foot soldiers. That's the infantry. They do the majority of the work. If you have an invader, the neutrophils are on site and they eat them up. They literally, their membranes flow around those bacteria and viral particles, and they suck them in, and they liquefy them within themselves. Amazing what the neutrophils do. Basophils, as I mentioned, they produce histamine. They're the ones on the early warning line. They call for help when they see these things. Monocytes, macrophages, and dendritic cells are all in the same category. They circulate in the blood as monocytes. When they mature, they go into the periphery as macrophages and dendritic cells, and these fight viruses, they fight bacteria, and they also function to bring antigens to the T lymphocytes for identification, and again, they're saying, hey, is this a dangerous thing or not? Dendritic cells are really good at this. They pick up the antigens and take them in for identification. And then we have the eosinophils. They are particularly good for fighting parasites. But we don't have a lot of parasites around, so they get restless, and then you get allergies. And so eosinophils go up when you have an allergic response because you were too clean when you were a kid. And then I won't talk about complement until later if you have questions about it. We got to get down to the next section. One thing you got to know is all immune system cells have neurochemical receptors on them. That means that they are under the control of the brain. Now you don't think, maybe you should, now neutrophil, where do I want to send you today? All right, T-cell, are you sure you're doing your job? Because that's under the control of subconscious brain, but everyone has neuroreceptors on it. So turn the page and we'll talk about that. There was a study, I've quoted this study many times. It's a great study. They did it some years ago now. They took people and they said, let's measure your immune system function. We'll measure your IgA. IgA is made by the B cells, and it's found in saliva and in tears and in the mucus in your nose and in your GI tract all the way down to the bottom end. And it is the first line of defense against infection. So they measured the salivary IgA level of a group of people, and then they said to them, we want you to think back to a time in your life when you felt really helpless and used. Don't do this, or we'll turn out the lights on you. No, when you felt really anxious and it was a really bad time, and we want you to relive that experience for 5 minutes. You know, when someone abused you or harmed you, or don't do that. They measured their salivary IgA levels. They had them relive this bad time for 5 minutes, and then they measured their salivary IgA levels again. They had fallen by 70%. 70% within 15 minutes. Be careful what you think about. Be careful what you think about. You may know, you may not, that the majority of cancer is detected clinically after a stressful period in a person's life. Okay? Now, fortunately, there's another side to this experiment. They took the same group of people and they said, we want you to think back to a time in your life and relive it, really get into it when you felt loved and accepted and it was a wonderful time, and you can all do that now. It was just the most wonderful time in your life. And they measured their salivary IgA levels before and then afterwards, and within 15 minutes the IgA levels went up by 80%, and they didn't come back to baseline for 5 hours. So be careful what you think about. It's really, really important. They've done other studies, took some college kids that needed money and they sprayed cold viruses up their nose, and then they asked them various questions and did various tests to see why some were susceptible and others not, because not everyone that's exposed to a cold virus gets it. Some do, some don't. The thing that correlated most highly with who got the cold and who didn't was the self-reported stress level. That's what correlated the highest. How stressed do you feel that you are? That correlated better than anything else. Same harmonic that we're working on. So be very careful what you think about. There's a few quotes here that I think are just really, really important to internalize. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. William James, this is not the William James the philosopher, but a William James who did a lot of research in stress. Although I like Will James' work as a philosopher too, both good people. Hans Selye, the father of the stress research really, he said it is not stress that kills us, it is our reaction to it. Same thing. Choose your thoughts, so very important. The truth is that stress does not come from your boss, your kids, your spouse, traffic jams, health challenges, or other circumstances. It comes from your thoughts about these circumstances. Remember that. Choose your thoughts. You know, I've heard so many of my patients say, my kids make me so mad. Have you ever said that? No, I know you haven't. But you know someone that has. And what you need to say is, I have chosen to respond with anger to the way my children are acting. That's what you need to say. because that's the truth. Because you can choose your reaction. Very, very important. This is probably the most important thing you're going to learn tonight. Yes, diet's important. But if you can affect your IgA level by 80% within 5 minutes, you can't even eat your food that fast. Not do yourself any good. All right. And here's a few from Viktor Frankl. I think they're very important. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. It is in that space, it is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom and the health of our immune system. That's from Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read the book, read it. If you have read it, get it off the shelf and read it again. When we are no longer able to change our situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Now, did this guy know what he was talking about? Yes, he had been in Auschwitz. He knew. He couldn't change his situation. He was captive. But he could change his attitude. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Never forget this. Do not be held hostage by your circumstances. You don't have to be. You are a human, and you can choose your thoughts, and you can choose your response. Sometimes you don't want to take responsibility for your response, and if you don't, your immune system will suffer anytime someone looks cross-eyed at you. Don't let it do that. All right, now you really came to hear about diet, so here we are. Diet and maximizing the immune system. Eating food like you greatly complicates immune system work. Well, what do I mean by that? All right, let's go down to the border. We're sitting down there. We may not agree with the administration's stance on immigrants, but our job is to identify people that do not have U.S. citizenship and shouldn't come across the border. Well, if everyone that came up to the border had, these green antennae coming out of their head and a big sign, "I'm a Martian," would we have any problems? No, we could sit there and say, "Oh, there's another one of them." We'd have no problem. We could relax. But if everybody that came up to the border spoke perfect English and looked like you and I do, we might make a few mistakes, right? In identification. Well, what's the biggest border in our body where things cross? It's in your mouth. It's not outside. It's inside. Your gut, that thing called the small intestine, if you ironed it out, pulled all those villi out, it would cover an area about the size of half a tennis court. Do you have that much skin on the outside? Not most of us. Yeah. The biggest border is our gut. And what comes up to the gut? Stuff that isn't us. You ate some beets and potatoes and all that. That isn't you, is it? The immune system has to look at that and say, is this safe or not? And if you're eating a pig or a cow, I'm here to tell you it's a lot more like you than a beet. And that's why when people eat animals, they have much higher incidence of autoimmune disease. In fact, if you come to my office and you have rheumatoid arthritis, newly diagnosed, I will try to get you to go on a plant-based diet. I will for other reasons too, but particularly with rheumatoid, because I know if you go on a plant-based diet, 70% of the time your arthritis will go away. Not with drugs, just changing your diet. Why? Because the immune system says, oh, we can relax. Now let's see about that cartilage. Is it really like us or not? Well, yeah, it really is part of us. Let's take some thinking. No, we'll just leave it be, and then the arthritis goes away. And that's autoimmune disease. Make the job of your immune system as easy as possible. Don't eat things that are like you. That's why cannibals, it's not a good idea. Yeah, you don't want to go there. That's number one. Number two, eating excessive amounts of rapidly absorbed carbohydrates, that's sugar, stiffens white blood cells, membranes and impairs their function. I know I'm going to be busy after Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. Why? People eat a lot of sugar. The cell membranes are glycated. We've talked about glycation before. Once it's glycated, it's stiffened. Now those white blood cells, they circulate in your blood. That's why they're called white blood cells. They have to squeeze between the cell membranes of the blood vessel to get out into the tissue to do their work. But if they're stiff, can they squeeze through? No. And when they get out there, how do they eat those bacteria and viruses? Their membrane has to flow around the little virus and suck it in. They don't have a mouth. They can't open their mouth. They flow around. But if their membrane's stiff, Albert Sanchez did the original work back in 1965. I've spoken with him about this. He found that if you have the equivalent of an amount of sugar in one banana split, you paralyze the ability of the neutrophils to eat or phagocytize bacteria for 6 to 8 hours. So if you really want to get sick, then what you do is have a lot of sugar and invite all your friends that are coughing over to your house, and you'll get it. Yeah, you'll get it. And then you can call in sick. I'm sick. And you'll get it. But if you don't want to, keep your sugar intake low. No problem with apples, bananas, peaches, berries. Not a problem. Why? Because they have pectin in them, and pectin is really good at slowing down sugar absorption. So fruit is the best thing that you can eat for your immune system, and one of the best of those is berries. Berries. Now we're back to NK cells. You thought I'd forgotten, didn't you? Okay. So if you want to double your NK level, they did a beautiful study. They had people eat a half a cup of blueberries a day, and their NK cell, that's the special forces, lymphocytes, in their body doubled from 2 billion to 4 billion. And then they fed them some cardamom, and the activity of those cells doubled. So if you want to have something really good, have some blueberry muffins with a little cardamom in it. And then your immune system will take off, provided you keep the sugar low. Right? Okay. So the other thing that will increase that is exercise, and we'll come to that shortly. All right. Inadequate or excessive calories will impair the immune system. If you're malnourished, eat. There are no bad calories for someone who needs them. All right? I don't care what you eat. If you're malnourished, you need to eat calories. I'll put people on anything if they're malnourished, just to get them to eat. I don't care if it's sugar, I don't care if it's eggs, I don't care what it is. If they're malnourished, you need calories. Your immune system needs calories to function. But too many calories raises inflammation, because fat sitting around causes inflammation, and then the immune system has to deal with that too. Remember, they not only fight invaders, but they try to put out inflammation, put a damper on that, just like any good National Guard would. So don't eat excessively, but maintain your nutrition. That's number, three. Number 4, the foods that are best for the immune system are both nutrient and antioxidant rich. That is, they can kick the immune system into high gear, and they can shut it off quickly. You need nutrients, the minerals and the vitamins, and you need nutrients for the immune system, but you also need antioxidants. And guess what provides that? Only plant foods. There are very few antioxidants in animal food.
What about seaweed?
Seaweed is a plant, I think, and it's excellent. And there's several that have been tested and really ramp up the immune system. Wakame, is it? That's been tested very, very successfully. And here's a list of the best foods. Allium, what's that?
garlic, onions.
Yeah, garlic, onion, shallots. You had some. Did this have garlic in it? Garlic and shallots. It's really good for boosting the immune system because it's one of the richest sources of antioxidants as well as nutrients. You can turn it on and you can turn it off. So that's really good. Chives is another. All of those in the allium family. And then berries. I mentioned blueberries. Why did they study blueberries? Because it was funded by the Blueberries, this Growers Association. But raspberries, blackberries, boysenberries, elderberries, one of the best is actually barberries. You can't grow them here in Maine because there's a rust that goes from barberries to pine trees. But barberries you can buy dry, and they're really potent antioxidants. I use them. If I feel like I'm need a little more rest or haven't eaten quite right, or if I'm getting acne, I'll eat barberries and it'll turn it off. It's amazing. They're great. But any berry will work, yes.
Does it matter whether they're cooked?
It doesn't matter whether they're cooked or not. And the nice thing about allium, particularly garlic, is if you eat it raw, it's really good to reduce your stress levels because only your real friends will. So I mentioned berries, brassicas. You had some in this. That's Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale, collards, cauliflower. Those are amazing at turning on the immune system and turning it off when you need to. They're rich in antioxidants. They're one of the best foods for preventing cancer as well. And then there's herbs. You had some herbs in that? What was it? Thyme and oregano and basil, and those are wonderful for the immune system. That was my immune system's feeling better already. Anyone want a second serving? Okay. And then non-irritating spices. Turmeric is excellent. Ginger, excellent. Those are some of the best ones that you can get. And then tomatoes. Cooked tomatoes, interestingly, is just as good, if not better, than raw tomatoes, because we absorb the nutrients very well. That's true with the brassicas as well. If you want to get the best from them, either have them as sprouts where it's more easily absorbed, or cook the kale and the Brussels sprouts and whatnot. That's really good for the immune system. Then sweet potatoes, I had to put that in because you had some. Winter squash. In fact, any colorful vegetable or fruit will help. And if you look at any study on this, the higher the intake of fruits and vegetables, the lower the rate of infections, the lower the rate of cancer, the lower the inflammation, for several reasons. One of them I mentioned in an earlier lecture. All of these foods are rich in fiber, and fiber feeds the bacteria that produce butyrate, that keep the immune system calm and happy and relaxed. So when an invader does show up, they're rested and boom, they can get it. If they're on a constant state of higher alert, they fatigue and then they don't respond as quickly. Exercise, 30 minutes daily, stimulates immunity and is very helpful. But if you run a marathon, make sure you eat beets and come have some of this entree so that your immune system can recover. It's very common after a marathon for people to develop a viral infection because it does suppress the immune system. So up to 90 minutes a day of vigorous exercise is good, but you can go. Anybody running marathons every day? I didn't think you guys. All right. And then some final recommendations. Don't smoke. Don't smoke wood smoke. Don't smoke any smoke. Don't smoke marijuana smoke. None of that. Smoke is inflammatory. Avoid it. Maintain a healthy weight. We've talked about that. Minimize alcohol. Why? Well, what does alcohol do to your brain? It's sugar. What else? let's say you've had 2 drinks. Are you thinking quite as clearly? Foggy. Guess what? It causes the same thing to the immune cells. If you drink, the immune cells do not react as quickly. It's no surprise because they're under the control of the brain. Have a few drinks and then they're kind of drunk like you and they don't get their job done. And this has been shown over and over. It's one of the reasons why the Lancet article, you may have seen it a few months ago, said the amount of alcohol that you should consume for health is 0. 0. Yeah. It may be good for your heart, so you can die of cancer instead. Anybody want to sign up? I don't think so. All right, and then get adequate sleep. Minimize stress when possible, and when not possible, change your response to stress. Any questions? Tom Brady has a lot of things right. One of them is his throwing arm. That's really good. And his diet is good too, except he may suspect that he has a allergy to the nightshades. Some people do. And those that do can have an inflammatory response to them. That's very few people. But if you have bad arthritis, you might try eliminating the nightshades and see if it gets better. I would say it's less than 2% that it gets better. They get a lot of press, but the nightshades include tomatoes and potatoes and eggplant and peppers, and I don't want to do without them. Unless you can prove to me they're not good for me. And I think there's a lot of data to show that the vast majority of people are not harmed by them. And the same is true with allium. Maybe his players don't like him eating garlic when they're in a huddle, I don't know. But you can't argue with his abilities. He's in his 40s and still at the top of his game. So I guess he hasn't gotten his head butted too many times out there like some of them. Yeah, unfortunately, aging is hard on the immune system, and often you'll get a viral infection that gets the immune system ramped up, and it happens to have some coating on that virus that looks like other non-dangerous things in the environment. We see this with asthma often after, not often, but occasionally after a viral lung infection, people will get asthma. But down-regulating the immune system helps, and switching to a plant-based diet will help. The other thing that helps with that is nutritional yeast, which calms the immune system and excites the immune system both. It's very interesting. For most people that's safe, not for those who have Crohn's disease. But allergies, it's been shown to be very helpful, and it doesn't turn off the immune system, but it down regulates it just a bit to our benefit.